Well, Poskett, what one thing do you wish you'd have known 10 years ago?
I think my fundamental understanding or belief of what strategy in an agency world anyway has changed radically, and I wish I knew this from day one. So when I began in strategy, God, like 20 years ago, you can see from the grey hairs, it's been a while, but I thought it was about being the smartest guy in the room or the most creative guy in the room, having to be super intelligent, maybe a bit intellectual. I throw all that out the window now. Actually, I have a deep suspicion of overly intellectual or seemingly very clever planners. And that's why, because really what I think the function of strategy is in an agency anyway, and actually more broadly within business, is twofold. Really great strategy is two things. Firstly, business life is messy and complicated. So really the power of great strategy is simplification, reduction, getting to a single-minded point of view. And secondly, and equally, and if not more important, is persuasiveness or the art of the sell. Now that's not like a slimy Donald Trump
Snake oil
deal. It's not snake oil nonsense. But what I mean is, not only are corporations complicated, they're full of political fiefdoms. And really the art of a great strategist is to have a single-minded point of view and then find a way of selling it throughout a company. Because at the end of the day, you could be the smartest planner, the most creative planner. You could be literally like the Einstein of strategy, if that thing even exists, and have revelations on a daily basis. But unless you can sell it and get people to go with you, is pointless. So the one thing I wish I knew 10 years ago or 20 years ago is that really the art of strategy is simplification and selling.
Phrases I hear often on this show are strategy is a creative process, or strategy is a process without the word creative in there. And you hear of lots of fairly negative comments about sort of the genius strategist who is going to sort of come in and ride in and save the world. And it seems like you've kind of realized that's not where we are, and that reductive and simplification. But I'll push back and say, is there a danger in oversimplifying? Life is complicated. People are complicated. People are messy. People do weird things. If the job of a strategist is to simplify, can you oversimplify sometimes and try and take complex issues, make them too simple, and then almost go too far on that journey?
So that's I love that. Great response, Adnan. Great question. I have two things I'd say to that. I'd say the first is I'm going to sort of make up a quote from Einstein.
You wouldn't do first. Everybody's done that.
He's got so many made up quotes online, but it serves the purpose. So I think he said something along the lines of, or I saw this on a YouTube video the other week, which is like, only those people that can, only once you understand a concept or anything or an idea very in detail and you fully understand it, can you then relate in a very simple way. So I would say the two aren't opposite. Actually, to have that nuance, that deep understanding, that rich understanding is a prerequisite for simplification. The second thing I'd say is there's a difference between simple and simplification. So simplification, when done right, still has nuance. It reflects the truth and all that good stuff. Simplicity could just be a bit dumb-minded. I'm not saying, simplification and dumb and stupidity are not the same thing. Yeah. Actually, there's a real art and power and magic in simplification when it's done well. And I think, if I'm honest, I'm definitely not the smartest person you've had on this podcast, and I'm definitely not the smartest strategist. I'm not even the best strategist by a long stretch. The one thing I'm good at, and I think it's because I'm dyslexic, is very good at simplifying things, I'd say. And that, if you look at the LinkedIn nonsense that I write on a regular basis, that's really what I'm doing, is simplifying stuff that probably other people have said before, to be honest. Though.
Yeah, and I think you're probably sort of tipping into two other things there. So let me come back to the LinkedIn thing in a minute. With the simplification, but I do agree. My starting point with most projects I work on is, what problem are we trying to solve? Because, you've sent me a brief. I've got a dozen pages, or if it's a great brief and there's 2 pages, I'm over the moon. But even then, it lists a whole bunch of things. And it's like, but what are we trying to solve right now? Not what's the problem 2 years' time, not what was the problem last year. What is the biggest problem we're trying to solve right now? And just getting agreement on that in the room can be really, really difficult. I always tell the story. 100%. I worked with a building society, and we had the chief exec, the senior marketing person, and senior finance person. It was a relatively small building society. And I said to her, what is there's a lot going on here. What's the biggest priority for you over the next 12 months? Just write it down. And they wrote down 3 different things. One of them said new mortgages. One of them said savings. And the other one said, what was it? It might be remortgages. But it was like 3 different products in 3 different, well, you're like, but you run the business. How do you take this forward if you three think different things are important? So understanding, getting that bit down as simply as you can. What problem are we trying to solve? And then taking it from there allows you to build on that solid foundation. So yeah, no, I'm a big fan of trying to make it as simple as possible.
And that's often why they bring you in. Often the reason they bring in people like yourself and me is to do that, is to have an external person to simplify it, but almost like get alignment on different agendas. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
you're refereeing. I think that you say sales. Yeah. I think it's a bit of refereeing sometimes, because you've probably sat in those rooms where you can almost feel the tension between the internal team, and you're looking going, oh, so you want this, and that's why you've brought me in, and you don't want that, and you're here to make your right. Okay, I'll just get my black and white striped shirt on. We'll do the umpire in here. Yeah. Companies are crazy, 100%. Aren't they? It's weird how they manage to grow despite themselves rather than because of themselves.
100%. I think whenever money and power gets involved, it gets very messy. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. We'll have a quick intro, and then we'll come back with the rest of the episode. Hey up and welcome to the Strategy Sessions. My name is Andy Jarvis. I am the host of the show, and I want to thank you for coming along and listening today. Will Poskett, as you've just heard, is a great guest. He knows what he's talking about, great strategy experience, and some really interesting stuff coming in the next bit of the show that I know will make you better at what you do. So thank you for choosing today. If you really get value out of this episode, or there's something said by the Will or myself at some point during the show, please do ping it on to a colleague or somebody you know who you might find it useful. It's really helpful to help the show grow when people send it as a recommendation and a referral. So please just send that WhatsApp, send that Slack message, send that Teams, go have a listen to Andy and Will chatting. Thank you very much for that. Right, enough of me. Let's get back to the show and hear what Will has to say. Onwards. Will Poskett, welcome to the Strategy Sessions. Do you want to just give a bit of an introduction as to who you are and what the hell are you doing on the Strategy Sessions, Will?
Oh, so that's a good question. What am I doing here, Andy? So my name's Will. Some of you might know me from LinkedIn, where I write regular nonsense for some reason, talking about all things strategy and brand. But in my normal daily life, I run a strategic and creative studio called Defiant, where we work with brands like Bella Italia, Beavertown Brewery. We've just won Tullamore Dew, part of William Grant and Sons. Seem to be doing a lot of alcohol recently, which I don't know if that says a lot about me personally. Hopefully not. But we've got a good portfolio of brands.
The shakes are going, Will. The shakes are still there. You can see your hands just off screen.
No, I'm on dry Jan now, so it's all good. So we have a great variety of brands. And I think what we do differently is that we match very senior sort of agency talents or very senior creative strategists, account people, and we match them with entertainment specialists. So, for example, we work with influencers and we bring them into the creative process. We work with comedians, BAFTA-winning comedy writers, and bring them into the creative process. And it seems to have served us very well. And it gives us very different output. We can make you a TV ad and out of home, but we've done lots of weird and wonderful stuff, from content series, entertainment series, brand IP, and all the rest of it. And then prior to that, I spent 20 years working at famous agencies that my mum had never heard of, such as Droga5, Wieden Kennedy, and the only one my mum had heard of, Saatchis and Saatchis. So yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Well, we're going to pick into all of those bits across the next 45 minutes or so, but I want to let's start with booze. We're recording this in January when, as you say, everybody's off drink. But I love the marketing in the alcohol industry. I've done a lot of it in the past, and the restrictions that are on what you can and can't do, I think, are fascinating, and how that can then drive creativity, especially because for a long period, it didn't drive any creativity. It just meant everyone in the alcohol sector did almost exactly the same thing for about 10 years. Now it seems that strategists and companies have got to grips with, okay, this actually gives us a lot of space. So tell us why you were brought in by Beavertown initially. Give people, we've got maybe a third of the listeners are in the US. So, give a feel to Beavertown, because I don't think they might know that brand.
Yeah, well, it is growing in America. So part of the brief we were given it was a global campaign to do multiple markets, US being one of them. But yeah, sure, I can talk around that. So really, I mean, Beavertown was definitely on my bucket list of dream brands to work with, especially as I call I'm a late stage millennial or hipster. And, Beavertown was definitely brought up in that craft beer generation. been around for about 15, 20 years, hasn't it? And it was a super interesting brief. So we worked directly with their CMO, Tom Rainsford, and the senior leadership team. And the challenge they came to us was they were facing many challenges, but I think at the heart of it was, Beavertown was very much like a leader in craft beer. But since it was fully acquired by Heineken, the challenge they had is that how do they go mainstream? So, there's a far bigger growth market and broader bit in all beer, basically. And we know from the bar and shops, this world and all that, you want to go for light buyers. There's a clear ambition to go from leader and challenger brand of craft to, become a big player in the broader beer category. And I think, also, to be quite honest, Heineken have bought them and they've got clear commercial targets of driving volume and value growth at a bigger scale. So there's a commercial thing there. I think at a brand level, there's a number of challenges they face. So, in fact, Andy, if you don't mind, you like Beavertown? You drank it, sure?
I do, sure. Yes, yeah.
Let me ask you a question, and I got this wrong, so no pressure when I started on it. But how many beers do you think that Beavertown makes? Like different SKUs or whatever.
I can think of maybe 3. There's neck oil. There's the other one that looks like neck oil but is stronger and tastes very similar.
Gamma Ray, yeah.
That's the one, Gamma Ray, thank you. And I could think of another one that I can't quite put. It's like a citrusy IPA. So I could think of 3. I can't believe that a company like that only does 3, so I'd probably say like 5.
Great response, Andy. And I thought something similar. And I'm a heavy buyer, shall we say, of neck oil. So yeah. I thought there's only about 3 or 4. They've actually got about 27 that they produce. Now, the problem with that is they're spreading their spend and investment and focus far too thinly across it. To make matters worse, but not surprisingly, about 97% of all their sales comes from neck oil. So they've got this problem where they've got a diluted master brand from investment and focus, and all their sales are being driven from neck oil. So the first kind of brand challenge we had, as they want to go more mainstream, is how do we scrap this world where they were trying to promote all these different tiny little SKUs and build lots of equity into the master brand? So how do we basically do a portfolio job, focus on less products, but then whenever we talk about said products, it ladders up to a bigger idea, kind of a master brand idea. The second one, by their own admission, what I love about Beavertown is we're a very creative organization. I'm not just saying this to be nice, but the CMO of Beavertown is probably one of the best CMOs I've ever worked with. Not only is he a lovely guy, but he's kind of like a creative director. He's an incredibly creative man. But the consequence of that is all the creative people that work for him has seen the brand chop and change creatively every year. So what we did at the beginning of the process is, if you look back at the last 3 to 5 years of their comms, no consistency. Sure, they've got that beautiful illustrative style, but there's never been what we call like a big idea or a consistent idea across it. So the second challenge is we need an idea that will stand the test of time. The third one, which is my personal favorite, I did one of my favorite charts of last year, where there's a chart of Jeremy Clarkson versus Jeff Goldblum. Now you might be saying, what am I talking about? Well, basically they're the same age, but they're very different look and feel. So the whole point of that chart is you want to grow up without growing old. So you want to be more Jeff Goldblum and less Jeremy Clarkson. And I would argue, sorry for the Brewdog fans on the call, but I would argue that Brewdog has gone into a Jeremy Clarkson sort of world. It's a bit cringe. It's kind of middle-aged punk. So they don't want to do that. Tonally, they want to be more cool Jeff Goldblum, grow up without growing old. And then the final challenge, they don't want to just do ads, basically. So that, even though they've got this big investment from Heineken, they don't have the spend of like some of the super brands like Stella in the category. So we had to think about beyond ads and create what meaningful acts. So yes, we did out of home and stuff, which I can talk about. But also I think what's more interesting is the kind of the PR and social stuff we did, where it was kind of providing real value to the community around the brand. So I know I've waffled there, but in summary, there was 4 challenges they faced. So basically consolidate the portfolio and build equity into the master brand, have an idea that will stand the test of time, more consistency, grow up without growing old. And then also, as I said, it's not just ads, have meaningful acts as well. And then we did a whole kind of strategic process of that. We devised initially 3 routes, strategic positioning, and then we put it into testing and 1 netted out. And I can talk about that positioning if you want. I don't know if you have.
Yeah. No, that's all right. The bit that I'm really interested in, so the master brand bit is, probably a challenge a number of people have been through. They coming up with the big concept that can stand the test of time. Yep, also one of those. The bit that I find interesting is how do you grow up without growing old? Because that is, as you mentioned, Brewdog, this is a challenge that a lot of challenger brands really struggle with. We had Tim Donald on from Sneak Energy. And, they've just gone from direct to consumer, now selling in WH Smith. So I was like, hey, great, you did Satanism stunts. You do kind of really funny, quirky stuff. Now you're selling to grown-ups. What are they saying? And he's like, well, they like us because we're having that. And I love the way that they pushed back on it. But I do wonder if I had that same conversation with him in 3 years' time, you suddenly start selling in Marks and Spencer. Are they going to be like, yeah, we love that, but Satan worshipping stunts, can we just tone it down? So I'm always intrigued in this. How do you stay true to the brand as you become, you're not just the cool hipster craft beer anymore, you go in mass market. So what were the challenges there that you faced as you're looking at that problem for them?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges they faced, actually. And I think, and I can talk about it in a second, but when we developed the strategy, I think we did a lot of consumer research with their heartland, so the kind of slightly uncool late-stage hipsters like me, because that's the heartland who still very much love the brand. But what's interesting is this younger generation, so like my stepkids, Gen Z, they think we're cringe as fuck, to be honest. So we also, when we did the research, spoke to that younger audience that's coming into drinking. And spoiler alert, they very much do drink. That's a myth that they don't drink.
They do. Let's just kill this one right now. Now, I have seen the stats, right? Younger audiences are drinking differently, and they are drinking a little bit less from the stats I've seen. But that's necessarily a lot of the ways to measure this are what's being drunk in bar. Off sales. Off sales have barely moved, if not in certain categories, have gone up, haven't they? So, millennials aren't drinking or Gen Z aren't drinking as much in pubs as we used to do in the 90s when lads was all the thing. Right? Yes, that has changed, but that's because it's £7 a pint when you go into a lot of pubs. Home drinking, you look at off sales. Off sales is chugging along just nicely. Tesco aren't going, oh, we're not selling any drinks. Selling fucking shitloads. So, yeah, young people do drink, right? Next question.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Andy. Yeah, on-trade is having a problem. I think socioeconomic factors, macroeconomic factors, it's very expensive. Yeah. I mean, back in my day, I could get a pint for like £3, and now it's like £8 in London. It's absolutely nuts. Even up in North, where I'm originally from, that's getting quite pricey as well.
And even where, like going into a pub, I don't ever remember going into a pub and it being cold until post-COVID, right? Pubs were always warm places to be where you sat and drank for ages. Now it's almost like pubs are like coffee shops. You go in, you have one or two, and then you move on because, either it's cold or it's not. It's just drinking culture has shifted, undoubtedly. And yes, non-alcoholic beverages have got infinitely better and are getting, being drunk more in pubs. Absolutely. All that. Off sales is doing pretty damn well, though. Really damn well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, to round the circle on that, I think what's changing is where they're drinking, as you said. So it's off trade at home. Also, the way they're drinking is changing. So I would say it's actually quite similar to our generation, I reckon, as well. Where they're not drinking regularly, but when they drink, oh boy, do they drink. And they preload. They preload before a night out as well. Look at the rise of Buzzballs. Absolutely disgusting drink, in my opinion. But Buzzballs has done so well because of those market trends. It's drinking at home, preloading, blah, blah, blah. So
yeah. And cocktails as well. I mean, like, I think I used to have the odd cocktail. Like if I was just back from playing five-a-side, I would drink a lager and lime or a shandy. That's a cocktail, I think, right? And now you go into a bar and you can't move for fucking people ordering cocktails.
It's just a weak beer, Andy. It's not.
Is that all right? Well, whatever. You can't move in a pub. You go into a bar now. When you go and you're like, "Can I just have 3 pints?" And they look at you like you've just landed from the 1960s. And they're like, "Do you not want to see our cocktail menu?" I was like, "Why would I want to pay £15 for a drink I don't even like when I can pay £7 for a drink that I do like? Just fucking give me a pint. Shut up. Get out of my way." Anyway, old man yells at clouds. Move on, they're saying. Move on. Right, so Will, take us back to talking about strategy, please, quick.
So on the growing up versus growing old thing. So yeah, you're exactly right. It's a really big challenge facing the brand. A lot of challenger brands get it wrong. And to rectify that, what we did is when we did the research, when we developed the strategy, we spoke to a lot of kind of the core audience, so the late stage millennials, whatever, but also that younger audience that's coming into the market. And, we tried to find a common insight that would appeal to both, like a universal insight, which we could build the strategy around, basically. So that was always fundamental. And I think also, I'd be interested to get your opinion, Andy, on the other strategists you've talked to, because testing can be a divisive subject for strategists. A lot of them hate it. I do it sometimes of some kinds of testing, but I think every credit to testing in this process, because that helped solve this issue as well. So when we developed the positionings, we did a very early strategy test, quant strategy test with that younger audience and kind of my age audience, which kind of like gave us a peace of mind as well. So I think it was like developing an insight that appealed to a younger and older audience, but also validating the strategy with that audience as well to ensure it wasn't cringe or, not growing up in the wrong way sort of thing.
Yeah. Look, so we've not, weirdly, not overly dived into testing a huge amount. I know from talking to a few people on the show and a few people off the show that it seems to be really divisive, as in people test everything or people test nothing. It's like, well, what would you do that for? It's not right. I think the system two, get it right, come on, have shown that I think the industry has grown up a lot and changed a lot in the last decade or so, which has made a big difference. But testing concepts and sort of earlier stage stuff, personally, I think is really valuable. Focus groups, fantastic. In-depth interviews, fantastic, but you've got to see if it scales as well. So, I'm a fan, and if you can get it in, I think as he's talking about here, especially when you're straddling different generations or diverse groups of people who buy the same product but for a different reason, then it becomes really important that you're not going to isolate a bunch of potential or current buyers very quickly by going, we're going to talk about this.
Yeah, totally agree. I think there's what Wiedens they used to talk about in terms of testing, test early and late, but never in the middle. So I think, research is really valid at the beginning, testing a strategic hypothesis, doing econometrics and brand tracking at the end is really good. I think for me, where I think System 1 are great, probably best in class, but where I do have a bit of an issue is like when you have link testing. I don't know if you've ever had the mispleasure of doing link testing and all that sort of stuff. It's just...
No, luckily not.
It's total nonsense in my opinion, but sorry to any Millwall Brown listeners on the call, but yeah.
Did you have to sit through the meetings and go, this is really fascinating, interesting, thanks for that report, and then just walk off and do something different?
No, I'm a bit of a blunt object, and I think that's probably why I ended up starting my own company. I just told them what I really thought, so I was always like, this is nonsense, but anyway, yeah.
Excellent. So you've done the work with Beavertown. You wrote something about strategy a while ago, which said there's a lot of people who think strategy is about frameworks or clever words, which maybe goes back to what you said earlier. But there's three important things, which is the story, the purpose, and the action of what you mean by that. So I think you've maybe perhaps covered the story and purpose bit so far. What do you think in terms of... So when you get to the action, is that just the execution of the campaign? Is that what you mean by that? Or is it the action that you are talking about you want the customer to go through when you are talking about strategy?
Put me on the spot a bit, Andy. I think I wrote that about a year ago, so it might not be too fresh in my mind, but I'll try to remember what I was trying to articulate at that point. But I think, you're totally right. So it was story, purpose, and action. I think you're right. I think the story is kind of a reflection on selling, the way you kind of sell it into organization. The purpose, you're right. Again, is kind of the single-minded point of view, like the simplification thing we talked about. Mm-hmm. And then the action thing for me, I think one of the frustrations I have is because I came from an advertising background. People presume that when I say action, they mean ads. Not really. For me, actually, I think action, look, when a brand strategy is doing its job really well and where it's most powerful is when a brand can guide the entire organization. There's very few brands out there that do it, but there are those that do have huge commercial success. I would say that Apple, for example, this idea, its purpose is like, it used to be around tools for creative people. Now, yeah, sure, it does cool ads, but for me, it gets more interesting is the retail experience, today at Apple, where you can learn how to be more creative with your Mac products. It's the actual products they create. The Mac that I'm on, you're probably on a Mac as well. Mm-hmm. It's literally a tool for creative people and it guides their MPD from the earbuds and so on and so forth. So when I talk about action, I think really what it is how you turn that kind of brand strategy into a North Star or a guiding thought for the entire organization. And I think one final thing I'd say on that, we are living through, unfortunately, very scary and interesting times. AI, socioeconomic collapse, potentially. But I think what's interesting is I think in this world of AI and where things are becoming commoditized, this idea of having a really powerful brand purpose or a single-minded brand thought is more important than ever. It is truly the thing that we use creativity to build a defensible moat at a business level, not just creating cool, sexy ads. And I think, that's my hill and I'll die on it. And I think it's because I'm dyslexic, I go on a few tangents and stuff. But what I think is really interesting is if you look at the decline in the big agencies, I think they've sold strategy short for so long. They've given it away in pitches for free. They articulate it purely in an advertising output. Really, if our industry was smart, I appreciate it's not easy, but we should be competing against the likes of McKinsey and Co. Selling upstream the big strategic thinking at a brand level, but then implementing it at a commercial business level across the organization. So in terms of action, what I mean is like, how do you take that brand thought, but articulate it and bring it to life across every touch point of the business, not just sexy advertising.
By the sounds of it, with Beavertown, you had not an open door there, but you had someone who was receptive to that idea of how it's brought to life. Because one of the big challenges in the alcohol sector, certainly on trade, is what people buy on their first drink when they walk through is still hugely important, which is why brands spend a phenomenal amount of money on counter mounts and displays. And when you walk in, and the first drink you order tends to be the one you stick with for a little while. So, and that's often well outside the scope of any brand strategy work or marketing strategy work. So is that the sort of thing where you were working with them so that this is not just it's just this lovely thing that looked pretty over here. It runs through the whole organization, so it can influence those touch points at different times.
Yeah, 100%. So the positioning we ultimately got to was about fuel, fearless self-expression. And that was actually born from a quote from the founder, Logan Plant, who's the son of Robert Plant, Zeb Zeppelin. You probably knew that, but
I didn't know that. All right,
no,
I know that now.
Yeah. So he's out of the business now. He sold out, lives in a nice house in Primrose Hill. But we went through the archives and found that a great quote from him where he said, the reason I gave up being a rock star, he was trying to be a rock star as well, and the reason he gave up being a rock star and became a craft brewer is because he said, brewing is like being a musician. It's a form of self-expression. So we built a whole strategy around that, and it appealed to both audiences in the testing. And then our consumer-facing articulation of that, or brand idea or creative platform, was never normal. That does two things. It's an articulation of a brand that has never been normal. The brand has always been fearlessly expressing itself, but also it's a call to arms for the consumer as well. So basically, in a world of social media, people are more holding back and being reserved, scared of being judged online. And we wanted to empower people to be more fearless and be their true self, whether it be in a pub or every day and so on. So we had this idea of never normal. And then to answer your question about how it came to life, yeah, we did out of home and all that. But I think where it becomes very interesting is like kind of how it might inform, we can't talk about it, but how it might form new product development. Like what kind of new beers could they create that would help to encourage different, segments to fearlessly self-express themselves. We help them with some working with their PR agency. We help them with some activations for on-trade as well. So we did like the Never Normal Pub. So on Bank Holiday, you could Bank Holiday Monday last August, you could win a trip in a hot air balloon and have a beer at 40,000 feet. Not 40,000 feet, 8,000 feet.
8,000 feet, yeah.
That'd be a terrifying balloon ride. About 7,000 feet and have a beer up there. It's a PR moment, but we're trying to push the boundaries of the experience. And then we had the Never Normal Happy Hour where, in certain pubs around London, and I think there's a couple in Manchester, we totally subvert the happy hour sort of moment as well. So to your point about exactly that, you're totally right. You go into a pub and it's your first point of contact with a brand. We're trying to disrupt that in a very kind of never normal way that kind of inspires people to be never normal, but also embodies the brand philosophy as well. I think where it gets interesting is, as we get into year two, so in the first year of the campaign, is ensuring that they are consistent and they don't try and change it again, which I don't think they will. But second of all, when you're going upstream and thinking about product development, there's lots of interesting stuff that they're brewing at the moment. And I think trying to influence that is super interesting.
I think when companies get that right, where marketing and brand sits at the middle of what they do, as opposed to being this sort of stuck-on function, there's power in that if they can get that right. And yes, this is a marketing strategy podcast, right? Of course, we're going to say that. But actually, I think the big win is, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops over the next couple of years. And if you start pulling that hair out, because we're just going to take it slightly down this road a little bit and start trying to weaken that concept a little bit. But I want to come to the other bit you've just mentioned as we sort of work back through some of the things you said about the agency model, because you've worked at, as you said, Wieden Kennedy, Droga5, Saatchis, some of the biggest agencies about, some of the best known in the industry, used awards as a measure of success. They were probably up there, some of the best about. And so firstly, I'm interested in, are they all the same when you get on the inside? Or is it like P&G and Unilever where they do the same thing sort of, but they're very, very different organizations?
No, they are very different. When you look at them, I would say, and maybe I'm more looking at agencies more than most people because I'm in the market, but I would say from the outside, maybe Droga5 and Wiedens look closer together than Saatchis. But they are very different on the inside. I'd say that Saatchis, it was a very good agency. I was very fortunate to work there. It was my first step up to above the line. So prior to that, I did start in direct mail and then digital and then above the line. So it was
I
great
love direct mail. I love direct mail. I love it. Great place to learn.
Do you know, I think in retrospect, running a business now, I learned more from direct mail about how to market your own business than I did from above the line, like, lead acquisition and all that anyway. But yeah, no, I love direct mail. So Saatchis was good. It was a good proving ground, good foundations for learning strategy. Had a great mentor there who works with me now, actually, called Raquel Chicarel. She used to be the CSO at Grey, taught me everything I know. I guess if I'm being very honest, and I'm a very honest person, the thing I kind of didn't love about Saatchi and Saatchi is a very account man-led agency. So what I mean by that, it's very process-driven. And I think often account management has more of a say than maybe creative or strategy. And if I'm being and I think that's changed now, though. They're a lot better since I left. Creatively, they're really strong now. But back in the day, I think they weren't as creative as they could be, but they've moved on a lot now. Now, the difference between Wieden and Saatchis, both are very creative and brilliant agencies. But I would say Droga5, in my opinion, had the best strategy department I've ever worked with. So it was almost terrifying how good, they say you should work with people that are way better than you, so you increase your game. And that was definitely the case at Droga5. It was terrifying when I started there because everyone was so shit hot. They were so good. Equally very strong creative, but I think the strategy and creative department were equally strong working together.
Was that before the acquisition at Droga5?
I joined just after. Yeah.
Just that, right? Okay.
Yeah, just after. But yeah, incredible team there. Amazing CSO called Dylan Williams. He used to run planning at Mother. Amazing CCO, David Colblert's crazy creative, but I love working with him. Such a nice guy, but weird as hell. And then one of the creatives that's working with us now, Raf Baskin, he's at Defiant. I met him there as well, so really good. And then I love Widen's. I was freelancing there for about a year and a half. I really enjoyed it. I think creatively, incredibly strong creative department. I mean, everyone knows that. I would say, maybe controversially, strategy is a bit of a second thought. So often, I hate to say it, but strategy is used as a bit of a post-rationalization tool to sell the wacky creative. So they felt like a bit of a second-class citizen at Widen's, whereas at Droga, it felt more equal, if I'm being honest.
Interesting. They're very different organizations. But you mentioned earlier about how the agency world has sort of undersold strategy somewhat. And the reason I started out on my own different route, but had been working in digital agencies at the time and had, you might call it a bit of a fallout, you would say, with the agency I was at, where the strategy was never what was right for the client. It was right for what services we sold. I was like, that's not strategy. That's sales. That two different things. And then so it went off and became independent. But it does become, strategy does become almost a Trojan horse, doesn't it? It's just whacked in there for free to get the business on board and things like that. Which,
yeah.
Does it undervalue it? Is that just the way that the world is? Should we just accept that and get on with it? Or is there a bigger problem caused by that?
Yeah, it's such a big question. And I think it's a tricky one to resolve as well. I mean, I think when I started my business, I was a bit naive. I was like, yeah, just charge for strategy. But the truth is now, like with my agency, we're getting into pitches where you have to play the game a bit. So there's pitches, we're doing a pitch at the moment. I can't say who it's for, obviously, but there's a strategic piece in that. And we're hiring to do strategy as part of the proposal, which you got to do it to compete and beat. But it does frustrate me because obviously I think I'm biased because I'm a strategist. I actually think that strategy is a more valuable output than creativity, than the creative output of agencies. And I say that not because of my ego, but I would say, let's do a very brief history of advertising, for example. So 50 years ago, the world was a lot more simpler. You maybe ran a TV ad, a couple of print ads. There was a lot less product. If you think about FMCG, there's a lot less products on shelf. There's a lot less competition. Back in the day, you're going against, manufacturers and, traditional brands and stuff. Now you've got like creators building huge brands. Attention is in absolute free fall. There's more competition than ever before. It's never been more difficult to build a brand. And I think because of that, actually getting your strategy right, mapping out like the growth levers, where the growth opportunity is, all that stuff, like big strategic thinking, not just like advertising strategy, is so valuable for a company. I think it's telling. I think clients get that. I think what I've seen actually is you've got outfits like Craig and Bridget, who are the two former CSOs of AMV, have got their own strategy consultancy. There's all these little strategy consultancies popping up. In fact, the CMO of Tullamore, who's our new client, he was a strategy consultant director brands before he got the job at Tullamore. You know, he's ex-Diageo, really good, proper, like, world-class brand marketing thinker. And he's selling that to clients directly instead of having to go through an agency. So I honestly do think in a world where brand building is harder than ever, it's more complex, blah, blah, blah. I think having that really distinctive, differentiating point of view as a brand, mapping out commercial growth, is far more important than writing some funny ads. I love making ads, don't get me wrong, but that output feels so much smaller in my mind than the potential of what strategy could deliver to organization. And so every creative in our industry listening to this podcast is going to hate me from saying that, but that's honestly how I feel.
Well, when they see the clip on LinkedIn as well, Will says strategy is more important
you got
than
your
creative.
clickbait.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, discuss. Is part of the problem, though, that actually it's the need for creative which often gets companies thinking, oh, we need to do strategy. Is that a misreading of the situation? Is it, all right, we're coming into this next 3-year thing, we need a new position for the ads, or what are we going to do? And that leads them into strategy. Or are they doing strategy separately to that and then feeding it to you so that the creative can happen? Or is it a bit of a mishmash, even, depending on the company and how they work?
So I think there's a couple of questions there, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong, I'll try and play back the questions that you asked. But one question was, is it a mishmash of giving strategy away for free, or are they supplying you with strategy? Was that one of the questions?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're right, it is a mishmash. So one pitch, they'd done a strategy already, but then obviously we do a bit of creative strategy, which is like refining and reflecting it. And then another pitch we're doing, it's give the strategy away for free, do the strategy. So it's a total mishmash. In terms of your other question, I think I read it as, why do they feel like they want strategy? Is it creative leading that? I think that's a really great question, actually. So if you look at, to keep it brief, but the history of advertising strategy was born out of to help sell creative work. So, brand account planning is only about 20, 30 years, 40 years old, I think. And it was born out of, basically, agencies were burning so much resource and time in the creative department trying to crack the big idea, get, understand the audience and all that. It's too expensive. So they invented planning to basically get a client to agree to a brief, understand the audience and all that. And then that will make the creative process a lot more streamlined. So I think traditionally, you're right. I think agencies would use strategy to sell creative work, or in a pitch point of view, it helps kind of win the pitch. Strategy is one of the best tools, I think, for winning pitches because it kind of structures the whole argument. So I think historically, yes, you're right. A brand would go, oh, we want more creative work. And an agency would go, sure, here's some strategy as well to frame that and stuff. However, I think the world we're in now from where account planning was born is very different. And I think what we're seeing now is clients are seeing the bigger value and potential of strategy and how it can be a standalone product. And in fact, what I'm seeing as well is like a lot of clients prefer strategies as an individual product instead of tied to an agency, because they feel often that when you buy strategy within an agency, there's an agenda of selling creative work. And I think the proof's in the pudding. You're an independent strategy consultant. That's exactly what you're doing. Zoe Skayman's doing very well. She's a big hero of mine. She inspired me to go alone and to do it alone and stuff like that. That's what she does. As I said, Craig and Bridget do it. And there's all these independent consultants selling strategy devoid of the agency, because I think they're seeing it as a really valuable product, I think. So to answer your 3 questions, I think it is a mishmash of we've done the strategy, make some work, or, agencies will do it. I think traditionally agencies have given strategy as a tool to sell creativity, but I think now there is a far greater potential of strategy. As we've seen with the likes of yourself and other people going it alone, clients are keen to buy it as a standalone product.
And long may that continue. So clients, if you're listening, use an independent strategy consultant. You heard it here first.
Don't use me, use Andi.
It's fine. But yes, thank you. Again, another clip for LinkedIn. So challenges with the agency world then, you alluded to one where the McKinseys of the world are coming in and doing strategy at corporate level. And getting into creative, Accenture bought, Droga5. Did they buy Droga5? Have I got the right takeover? Yeah. And various, Accenture Song exists now. And they're moving into this world aggressively too with the bigger companies. Is that, the holding company model seems under threat a little bit at the minute. Is this just a natural cycle in the agency world of people going to independents and smaller shops and they'll come back to bigger down the line? What's your take on it at the moment?
Yeah, I have a really brutal opinion on this. But you're right. You're totally right. Look, the agency world is cyclical. And I think people forget that, the holding company model is I think it only really started booming. I'm probably wrong on the dates, about, the 90s onwards. Prior to that, back in the good old days, long before my time, I might add, but back in the heyday of advertising, the advertising industry was a very boutique industry. There's a lot fewer agencies. It was more boutique, and it was a lot more higher value. These agencies, the smaller number of agencies command a much bigger fee and a lot more value from their clients. I mean, I always joke with people, I got into advertising 20, 30 years too late. I would have lived in Hampstead with 2 Porsches now if I worked in the 70s or 80s or whatever like that. And I honestly think we're seeing a reversion back to boutique agencies. I mean, I think it's wild. So, if I look at my own agency, in the last 12 months, we pitched for and got down to the last 2 for a global headphone brand, and we won a project with them. And we were pitching against the likes of Mother, We Are Social, Marcel Paris. Do you know what I mean? 5-10 years ago, 2 things I would say is those big agencies wouldn't pitch for a brand that we went for because the fee was too small, and they won't say this, but the truth is a lot of these big agencies are desperate and they're going for smaller fees. And what's more interesting and exciting for me, selfishly, 5 years ago, a client like that would not have looked twice at an agency like mine. But they've got an appetite for working with smaller teams who are senior pedigree. And you work with the leadership, you know what I mean? Like, you're working with people that have had skin in the game for 20 years. Most big agencies, and again, they won't admit this, you'll meet the leadership team in a pitch, and then they'll put on a bunch of 20-year-olds to run the account because it's more profitable for them. Clients don't want that. They want to have the same senior people throughout. So to answer your question, I think we are going back to more of a boutique style. That's why I set up Defiant. It's all like small senior teams built around projects and so on. And I'm all for it. I think, here's a clip for you. I think the single worst thing that happened to the advertising world was the rise of the holding group. They took a really high value boutique industry and turned it into battery farm creativity. I can't stand holding groups. I think they're a total disaster for our industry, in the sense that the amount of times in pitches they gave stuff away for free. There's the model where they would give the creative, WPP would give the creativity away for free because the media agency, because they wanted the media money for the media agency and stuff like that. How can you expect and an agency say to themselves, oh, why are clients paying less? Why don't they value what we do? Well, the reason they don't value what you do is because for so long you gave it away for free. So
you didn't value it.
But,
so I am my favorite answer when I ask someone to come on the podcast is yes. My second favorite answer is a very quick no. And I once invited a very famous person who at one stage ran a very big holding company and then left under a cloud rather quickly. But I invited this person onto the show, and I got an email back directly from him within about a minute asking a clarification question, went back with the answer, and went, not for me, thank you. Which I loved, right? It's like, look, thanks. I didn't have to go through layers of bullshit, no PR team, no gatekeepers. It was just like, no, not for me. Great. So, but we never got to dig into the why did you ruin the ad agency question. So, but there you go.
There you go.
So moving on from ad agencies, this is more of you've started a small company, and just want to talk a little bit about LinkedIn and how you've built your audience and sort of generated leads for your business, because you've used LinkedIn excessively, a lot at least. Anyway, and you've got
it's excessive.
Excessive. You see 70,000 followers. I think that makes you a LinkedIn influencer, if such a thing exists. But you've also recently moved over to building your own newsletter and using that because, so let's talk about that. LinkedIn, you've built a profile. Is it working for you? What do you do on there? What do you do that's different, that's behind that? And then why the move into the newsletter?
So I started Defiant 3 years ago, and I started it in the most stupid, naive way possible. So as you know, I'm a strategist by trade, and I started that business with no founding clients, no idea of how to price a product, no idea how to hire or fire, any of that. So I had a lot of time on my hand, Andy. So what did I do? I started writing on LinkedIn because I thought I may as well use my time for something and write and show people I know. I sort of know some things about strategy. So I was very lucky because I think I had a bit of a first mover advantage. Back then, hardly anyone was using the LinkedIn thing. In fact, I got a lot of DMs going, what are you doing? This is so cringe, blah, blah, blah. But it's been a great learning lesson for me because it's taken, you are right, it is excessive. It feels excessive. I've posted for 3 years consistently, not every day, but at least every week. I've had 2 weeks off, which has been great though. And it's been a real learning lesson for me about the power of consistency, compounding your effort, and so on and so on. Does it work? Yes and no. So in the first year and a half, I got a lot of inbound, but to be honest with you, it was from startups or very small businesses, which might be great for other consultants, but I always had an ambition of, working with these bigger brands that have the budgets to make ads and, you know, create stuff and so on. So, but obviously at the beginning I needed money. So I took those briefs and did a lot of scrappy stuff. I mean, I won't say it on here because I'll never, you know, all my clients will try and undercharge me, but I gave strategy away for far too little in the beginning. And then what I've learned though, to be honest, is a lot of the direct inbound in the short term is from brands that are too small. However, one thing I've learned is like the big brands are watching, but their lead time is a lot longer. So I reckon Beavertown was watching or reading my stuff for at least a year and a half before they slid into the DMs. I think there's a limit to what LinkedIn, everyone's raving about LinkedIn now, you know, everyone's trying to do it. I'm not just saying this to stop them, but I'd err on the side of caution. The thing I would say about LinkedIn is it won't, for a typical agency, it won't fuel enough lead generation to keep your business going. So now, if I'm honest with you, what we're doing now, we've partnered with a lot of intermediaries that, you know, they have the keys to a lot of the more interesting, bigger pitches. And we've reinvested the profit from previous projects into that. So I think that will be more of the focus. And in terms of Substack, I've been doing the Substack for about 2 years, actually, and I go hot and cold on it. But I've gone quite hot on it at the moment. And the reason I did Substack is I'm always wary of any social media platform, whether it be LinkedIn or whatever. You don't own your audience. So I'm always wary that, you know, I mean, in fact, it's happening now. It's so hard. I don't get anywhere near the engagement that I used to get because the algorithms changed. I'm not in a pod. I'm not cheating the system like a lot of people are. And it's just a lot harder to cut through because a lot more people are on it as well. So the reason I've got Substack is you can drive people from a platform into an email list that you then have. And then the thing I love about Substack though, is that you can write obviously more articulately. I mean, people are surprised sometimes when they talk to me because I'm like, oh, you're actually all right in person. You seem quite provocative and salty on LinkedIn. The reason I do that is because the reason I'm trying to do that is because you've got to cut through, you've got to stop the scroll and be a bit provocative, right? I'm not that horrible in real life, but what's good about Substack is you can be more articulate and less Donald Trump-esque in your kind of like writing style, shall we say? So yeah.
Very good. So, on Substack, we'll put the link in the show notes to your Substack and your LinkedIn as well. But you've got a report coming out at the end of January. Do you want to just briefly touch on what the report is and what maybe a little snippet of what might be inside there?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andy. So we've been writing this report for a couple of months. It's called Winning the War on Attention, essentially. And this is definitely something that's been brewing in my mind for a couple of years. It goes back to a Substack I wrote about 2 years ago, actually, where, you know, if I think about the world that I come from, traditional agency, for ages, they've gone, TV is the most important platform, you know, be wary of digital media and so on and so forth. And we've really dived into the data. And I think we are at this, it's already happened really, but there's this tipping point where whether they like it or not, the data exists now to show that all TV viewership across all audiences is in decline, even the older generations like ours. At the same time, the idea of collective viewership is in decline. So, you know, we talk about, you know, like I don't know if you like Stranger Things. I binged it over Christmas, and you had the big finale.
Never seen Stranger. Don't ruin it for me because I am going to watch it. It's not that I'm too cool. I know it's not my thing. I've just never got around to watching it. My wife's not keen on that sort of thing, so it's kind of I need to watch it when I'm on my own. So I will watch it though. Sorry, Stranger Things.
That's another clip. Put that on, and you'll go viral. That'll be controversial. You haven't watched Stranger Things. But who is this guy? But if you look at the total viewership of Stranger Things, for example, in the finale. Yeah, it's great numbers, but it's only a fraction of like the average viewing figures of like Friends in the 90s and stuff like that. And at the same time, you're basically seeing that actually if you look at in the UK at least, total video viewership of TikTok and YouTube is now greater. You know, videos watched on TikTok and YouTube is greater than like legacy media and stuff like that. So whether we like it or not, there is a shift from traditional media to kind of like new media. And the whole report is basically understanding in this new media landscape, what is the shape of work or type of work that brands need to make to win the war on attention? Now, to answer that question, two things. We spoke to marketing leaders at Liquid Death, Elf Beauty. You know, Currys is doing great stuff on TikTok, Currys PC World. We talked to those guys, talked to Lego, and a really great Canadian man called Midday Squares, which I've fanboyed for a long time. So we kind of talked to these marketing leaders and then derived, I think, 4 or 5 principles about how to win the war on attention. And the final thing I'll say on it is what I found really interesting is there's a lot of agencies at the moment. The new buzzword at the moment is entertainment, which again, to be provocative, I have a problem with. Entertainment's not new. You know, the best advertising of all time has always been entertaining. What is different is the shape of the output. now it's about making. It could be about more making TV, online shows like Chicken Shop Date, Hot Ones, as opposed to a 30-second TV ad. So it's not about entertainment. That's a very shallow answer, in my opinion. It's the shape of the output. But all will be revealed when I finally get around to finishing it. Yeah.
Excellent. It's finished already. Promise you it's finished already. No. So listen, Will's details are in the show notes. Follow him on LinkedIn, sign up for his Substack. Just before you go then, Will, let me ask you one more question. And I think I might know the answer to this. I'm going to have an answer in my head and read your mind. What would you recommend people who want to know more about either strategy or marketing or brand or something? Where would you recommend they go? What would you recommend they read? It could be a blog, it could be a book. Who would you say this is what you need to have a look at?
You should do my course. I've got a strategy masterclass. You should do that.
There you go. Links in the show notes too. Strategy masterclass.
Yeah. No. Well, beyond that, I would say I do advise my masterclass because I think there's other courses out there which deal in frameworks and theory, but I'm all about what I said at the beginning: simplification and selling, like how to do that really well, and it's gone very well. But more general advice, and not to be biased, I think. Look, the thing I've learned is that strategy, in my opinion, is not a science; it's an art. And what I mean by that is there's many ways to do it. I think what you should do is you should find. Let's look at it from an advertising point of view. You should find advertising that you really love. Like, oh, that is really amazing work. Or how the hell did they get the client to buy that wacky idea? And find the strategist who did it. And then no doubt in this modern world, said strategist will probably write stuff. So I'd find the people that you really admire from a strategy point of view and then try and find stuff they've written. That would be my answer.
I'll start a podcast and ask them to come on because they mostly say yes. Usually.
Yeah.
Well, you proved me wrong. I thought you were going to say Zoe. It was going to be my that was my guess in my head. I was like,
she doesn't need a plug. Everyone knows Zoe already. She doesn't need a plug. Yeah, go and read Zoe. She's great, but she doesn't need it. So
perfect. Yeah. Well, look, Will Poskett, thank you very much for your time and good luck with the pitch.
Thank you so much, Andy. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, mate.